신성.
You want out of a time loop? You gotta learn how it works. Black Reef is a puzzle, and each visionary is a different piece. Here's Igor.
I am a respected scientist!
I've done so many loops, I've learned to run circles around him.
Hey, over here! I'm coming for you!
I've tried taking my targets out one by one more than I can remember, but there is never enough time. I go after one, another lives, because right now, half an island away, a different visionary is throwing his nightly cannibal masquerade. Alexis Dorsey.
Everybody shut up! This is my jam.
Igor's a big fan, yet somehow he never makes it to the party. Something keeps him home.
Gold, you there, buddy?
Here's the invite to the party. And here's why Igor blew it off. He made some kind of scientific breakthrough that morning.
I did it! I did it, it works!
That he makes every morning, unless I get there first. No experiment, no breakthrough. No reason for Igor not to drink his disappointment with Alexis. Now I got a shot at killing them both at the same time, in the same loop.
Is that Wolf? Hey, Wolf! It's time to hunt Pig! Wolf! I'm talking about you, baby! Come on, swing! A little help here!
Eight targets on my list, every one of them with grand plans for eternal life. To break the loop, I gotta break the rules. Clock's ticking.
And you just ran out of time. You keep forgetting, Colt. I'm not like those other idiots. Only got one name on my list. Yours.
Sony have been slowly updating their back catalogue of big PS4 titles since the PS5's launch. Not quite of the same ilk, effort or focus as the Big M, but certainly not without merit. It was only a matter of time though that one of the biggest got its turn in the sun. But have the gods smiled on us BC players once again? Let's find out. First things first, like previous updates, do not expect a great deal from this patch, as it is, for all intents and purposes, a regression update back to the day one disk code. As I have discussed before, disk code can be a treasure or a curse, but with next gen power BC it can enable us to get glimpses of the possibilities. Games such as AC Unity run unlocked frame rates, and even though its 900p resolution remains, on the PS5 it is now largely a 60 FPS title. The same as Sekiro, which unlocked on all versions, even patched for the Pro, and we can now see a locked 60 FPS. Some games are truly transformative though, such as The Last Guardian, which on the disc version you can also enjoy a near 4K checkerboard resolution and 60 FPS, whereas before it was borderline unplayable. Now, unlike that game though, Sony Santa Monica has been able to bring that day one code back into patch 1.35, which is almost the same, except it now adds in a new menu option for PS5, a 4K 30 as it used to be, or a 4K 60. That 1080p has been banished as it serves no purpose here at all. Now, the new best of both worlds takes the high-res Pro option and mixes it with that 60 FPS choice without the need to sacrifice the resolution. Aside all these, effects, animations, shadows and every lit particle are identical as that base console or Pro version. But not all things are equal. This absolutely cracking title on PlayStation 4 ran at 1080p and 30 FPS, with the Pro version offering a dual 3840 by 2160 resolution. Originally unlocked and then capped at 30 FPS, this high resolution achieved via checkerboard rendering, a hardware accelerated function of the Pro with its ID buffer on primitives, enabling them to be tracked across frames and thus support the accumulation of more than one frame into a single image, thus taking a lower resolution previous frame and an equal resolution current frame, blending them together into one image and resolve at a higher resolution. Now, many of these methods mean the engine renders each new frame at something around 1920 by 2160, and that each second pixel is either constructed of a previous frame's data via the ID buffer and velocity vectors, its colour, etc., or it's an interpolation of the surrounding pixels if no data is found to fall back on, such as off-screen elements coming into the frustum. Now, from this, a final 3840 by 2160p output is created, and in slow moving sections it looks excellent. Sure, it's not as good as true 4K, but it's much better than a base 1080p. The cost of this though is much lower than rendering 8 million pixels for every 4K image needed. About half actually, which helps fill rate, VRAM, bandwidth among other areas on the system. That said, it is more expensive than just rendering at that interim resolution. However, the engine needs to support it, so not all games can or did throughout the generation. Here though, on the Pro, it meant that 30 FPS was your limit, as at times it can still dip under that, which you'll see on the analysis here. That 1080p mode though cuts all the load away and leaves us with an unlocked frame rate to run as free as the birds. And the results are generally very good. Far from a locked 60, it certainly felt better to play thanks to faster input times which translate to more responsive controls, and it looks better with a lower static resolution but a higher temporal one due to that 16 millisecond frame time now, that refresh matching most TV's native VSync level. As you can see though, it can spend more time under 60 than that 30 mode with a softer IQ to boot. And at points which you'll see in this analysis, it can go right back down to 30. And this is where the PS5's backwards compatibility mode comes in. Now we no longer need to choose between resolution or frame rate, we get both. This is possible due to the PS5 having hardware-based backwards compatibility. In short, this means that the PS5's SoC can run its CPU and GPU logic at the required frequencies of the base PS4, the Pro, or an enhanced PS5 rate. With such a solution, it enables the code to run in the most stable level, and it looks like we are having to run that at Core Pro levels here. That means that we get a CPU frequency of 8 cores at 2.1 GHz and a GPU of 911 MHz, something we can validate with the loading test. Now, in these modes, the inherent I/O and SSD of the PS5 is not being used, and that means the comparison here should be limited by 4 things: the speed of the drive, the bandwidth of the comms channel, the frequency of the CPU, and the inherent game code underneath. I stress that a lot. Now, all these combine to give us an 18% speed boost over the Pro, which itself has an SSD with around 500 megabytes of read speeds. If we surmise that the CPU is the limiting the Pro here, then a 3.5 GHz Zen 2 should be around 39% faster. With the SSD being a factor of 11 times over itself, that shouldn't really factor into this conversation. It's more than enough to meet the demands. But in full Pro BC mode here, we're only getting around 5 seconds improvement on loading. Very good and beneficial, but certainly indicative of the system not being used fully. Now, should this scare us then? Are we going to expect lower results after this loading test? After all, we're going to be comparing a game that is running at a 50% greater pixel count at 60 FPS at the same clocks as the old Pro. Well, as you can see, the difference is transformative in itself. The game now doesn't drop a single frame. I tested loads of this game and I couldn't find any point. I'm sure there is somewhere hidden in it, but you would never feel it, you would never see it outside of a frame rate analysis. And there's certainly points here on the Pro where we can find to stress out the PS5 and what it's actually doing. Certainly in combat it can hover around the low 50s and the high 40s, but in the Lake of 9 it can cause the Pro to dip right into the 30s and almost go below it at points. There certainly skips into 67 milliseconds at certain points, but generally skipping between 16 and 50 milliseconds at that 1080p resolution, you can see that it struggles to hold anywhere near 60, and it feels like a 30 FPS game at this point. It's a very dense area on the GPU and possibly CPU with lots of draw calls. It's got alpha billboards, particle effects, screen space reflections, dense geometry again on Kratos and the shading effects on his body, and here even going through the door when there's not much on screen, it's potentially a culling issue in the background, who knows, but the Pro is down to 30 and their PS5 never drops below 60. Once inside, the Pro goes back up to 60 FPS. Overall, the improvements to the title are quite staggering at certain points, like here, where it can go from a 30 FPS 1080p game on the PS4 Pro to a 4K 60 FPS game on the PS5. Now obviously the PS4 Pro holds close enough to 60 to still feel much better than 30 FPS mode, but any areas in the title where these dips did occur, and they can happen in some of the combat sections like I say, that is now completely eradicated, and it feels much more responsive and fluid for that faster input time. And all that for free on your disc or downloaded version is a great boost to the God of War title on the PS4 for PS5 players, and I'm pretty sure that it will ramp up that impact in the very soon to be shown sequel to this epic 2018 title. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this and the deep dive look at these performance titles. If you do, keep it IGN and check back soon for much more.
Action of the legend, I'm a spark to the match, and I'm unbreakable. Scrap beneath the rest of the しょう。
You see things others can't. Hear threats others don't. Fight when others won't. It's up to you to save Tokyo.
The time draws near. You must prepare yourself.
After a generation of figuratively towering above its rivals with the monstrously successful PlayStation 4, one thing is certain: Sony's new generation contender will also loom large over its peers. Literally, this thing is massive. However, what the PlayStation 5 lacks in subtlety, it more than makes up for in potential, thanks in part to its amazingly fast SSD, but mostly to its truly remarkable new controller, the DualSense. While a good deal of what folks are going to be able to squeeze out of 2020's salvo of shiny new hardware may be bottlenecked to some degree by the screen that they own, the PS5's unique DualSense democratizes a next-gen gaming experience for all, delivering an amazing new level of haptic feedback that really needs to be felt to be believed. Make no mistake, the austere and unceremonious nature of the box and packaging is in stark contrast to the PlayStation 5 itself, which is far and away the most flamboyant looking console I've ever owned. Rather than a single shell, the PS5 appears to be made up of 4 separate pieces: a glossy black case sandwiched between a pair of warped matte white plastic plates with a detachable stand. I'll happily concede the PS5 does look a bit better in the flesh than it did in the initial product shots. The matte off-white finish to the plates is actually a lot nicer than I feared it would be, and the sloping vents flanking the strip of glossy black plastic that wraps around the edge of the unit are eye-catching. The problem to my eye is that the gradually widening black strip on the front and the flappy overhanging plastic corners makes the PS5 look a little bit like a piece of luggage that's stuffed too full to zip up properly. And the irregular curves remind me more of a cassette that spent a hot summer's day on a car dashboard than a PlayStation. It's obviously not the first white games console, but in concert with its sheer size and shape, it's surprisingly ostentatious for something designed to sit beneath or beside black televisions, black soundbars, black subwoofers, and a generation of black AV equipment and gaming hardware. It's a bit showy, and in a world of generally sleek and simple tech, it looks a bit out of place, like 2006's vision of 2046. On the front, you'll find access to the Ultra HD Blu-ray optical drive, a high-speed USB Type-A port, and a super-speed USB Type-C port, as well as the power button and eject button. These buttons are adjacent to each other, but the eject button is noticeably smaller, so if you're anything like me, there's now hope of not spending an entire generation trying to remember which button is which. On the back, there's the figure 8 power connection, an HDMI out, 2 super-speed USB Type-A ports, and an Ethernet port. Unlike the PS4, the PS5 does not feature an optical audio out. The stand is necessary because the misshapen nature of the plates means the PS5 can't sit flat on its side properly without it. It has a pair of small hooks which loosely clutch the back of the PS5 and a rotating base. Sitting flat, the console is simply perched on the stand without any additional fixtures. The base can flap around and slip left, right, or even off entirely, but that's something unlikely to frustrate unless you're regularly moving your console from place to place. Positioned vertically, a single screw is required to affix the stand to the console to prevent it from falling out of it. The slotted screw comes stored in the stand itself and is easy to install. If you don't have a flat screwdriver, a knife, or even your thumbnail will suffice. Appearances aside, there is one element of the PS5 that can't be as easily ignored, and that's the sheer size of it. Positioned vertically and perched atop its stand, the PS5 is about 40 centimeters tall, or 16 inches. With the stand switched, that figure is a fraction less when positioned horizontally, coming in at around 39 centimeters, but even in this orientation, the PS5 is still just over 11 centimeters high, or 4.5 inches, at the point where its top plate curls skyward. That's bigger than the grill-sized PS3 or the VCR-like original Xbox One. It's even bigger than 2 original PS4s stacked on top of each other. There are only 2 bigger white appliances in my house. One washes my clothes and the other keeps my butter cold. The PS5 fits in my furniture, albeit with the subtlety of a Humvee squeezing through a drive-thru, but may not fit in everyone's setup. It's quaint that this year's biggest console comes from the land of capsule hotels and K-cars, and it's the American console that's more compact by comparison. Initial setup is extremely simple. For PS4 users, the slim PS5 manual describes the ability to connect your PS4 console and PS5 to the same network to transfer saved data, downloaded content, and user information, though it doesn't outline the process. For me, the much quicker alternative was plugging in the USB hard drive I've been using as extended storage for my PS4 for several years. It's a cinch, and the PS5 can access your existing digital PS4 games from it instantly. For long-time PlayStation users, the PS5 makes it very easy to browse your whole digital library and sort between PS5 and PS4 games. Oddly enough, there's a search field for PS3 games too, though it comes up empty. The PS5 UI doesn't feel wildly removed from its roots on the PS4, particularly as you get deeper into the menus, but it's definitely different and significantly more elegant in a number of ways. Now, a single tap of the PlayStation button in the center of the controller will bring up what Sony has called the Control Center, which is a little like a taskbar on a Windows PC. Checking things like current downloads and what friends of yours are online on PS4 requires a bunch of shuffling back and forth, up and down, and left and right through menu icons. The PS5's Control Center places all that info at our fingertips after one button press. The other key point of difference are dubbed cards, which are also presented on screen when you hit the PlayStation button. Some of these are just fluff, like links to newly published articles about games you're following on PlayStation and recent screenshots, though the activity cards seem to have the potential to be a little more useful. There's slightly frivolous information about how much longer it's estimated you'll need to complete a certain level or task, but there's also the promise of the ability to immediately view pre-made game hints without having to reach for your phone. For example, it was revealed earlier this week, the PS5 remake of Demon's Souls will feature over 180 help videos that players can opt to watch if they get stuck. The ultimate value of the PS5's activity cards is hard to gauge at the genesis of the PS5 though. Hopefully, developers will embrace them as useful ways to communicate with players while in game and not turn them into lists of additional chores. There's other interesting stuff sprinkled throughout the PS5's UI too though, from a global setting to invert the Y-axis by default like the Xbox 360 used to do, to the ability to watch a friend play a game picture-in-picture while chatting to them as you play something else entirely. I'm not a particularly proficient multitasker, so I can't say I'm very interested in the latter, but the former warms my old-school upside-down heart. One of this generation's most important upgrades is the switch from traditional hard drives to solid-state storage drives, dramatically improving loading times across the board and potentially enabling games to load in new objects effectively on the fly. The PS5's SSD can read 5.5 gigabytes in just a second, which is on paper twice as fast as the Series X. In practical terms, it means I could go from powering up from a complete shutdown to perched on top of whatever Manhattan building I last left Miles Morales on in a mere 45 seconds. That still leaves time to tap your toe, but once I was in-game, the time it takes to go from selecting a save to load to actually swinging through Spider-Man Miles Morales' open world is basically a blink. After generations of watching progress bars inching across a screen, it's pretty stunning stuff. I thought that was going to be the game-changing feature of the PS5, but to my surprise, it's really the DualSense controller that boasts the biggest potential. It may feel fairly similar to the DualShock 4 at first touch, but it didn't take me long to realize it's really an incredibly impressive new beast entirely. Largely the same shade of white as the console itself, the DualSense is just a fraction larger than the DualShock 4 and has a more premium look, particularly in the translucent buttons which have an almost glass-like appearance. The options and create buttons are also more raised than they are on the DualShock 4, so they're far easier to find without blindly rubbing your thumb beside the touchpad until you find it or glancing down. The DualSense also has a built-in mic, making headsets unnecessary, but it still has a 3.5mm jack for those who prefer to use them. The charging port is USB-C. However, it's what's on the inside that makes all the difference, and the range of haptic feedback the DualSense can provide is quite astonishing. Nuanced rumble travels from palm to palm and with a wide spectrum of effects, from almost imperceptible pulsations to massive vibrations. The triggers not only buzz with force feedback like the Xbox One controller, but also fight back and introduce a brand new layer of immersion. It's seriously remarkable. The pre-installed platformer Astro's Playroom is a pretty wonderful tech demo for the DualSense and well worth experimenting with. It's a rich and fabulous demonstration of the new level of feedback the DualSense can output, and an adorable tour through PlayStation's long hardware history to boot. For a hardware generation jump that's currently muddied with a lot of cross-gen content and an overall feeling of something more incremental than the often seismic shifts we've experienced previously, the DualSense has emerged to me as a bit of a revelation. I've had to plug it in to charge every second day since getting the PS5, but it's worth it. In the power stakes, there's been a role reversal this generation, with Microsoft's new Xbox Series X arriving with reportedly 20% more grunt than the PS5. That said, it's a bit of a meaningless figure until we can properly examine how the Series X and PS5 cope with the same third-party games head-to-head. Regardless of the apparent power disparity, however, doubling the frame rate to 120Hz will also be on the cards with certain games, should your 4K TV support it, but personally, I suspect I'm going to get a lot more mileage out of the better resolution and lighting effects that players who opt for increased frames may be forced to sacrifice. Spider-Man Miles Morales, for instance, has the option to switch between a 30 frames per second fidelity mode with the maximum amount of visual flourishes and a 60 frames per second performance mode without things like ray tracing and other advanced lighting effects and temporal techniques providing a 4K picture from a lower resolution base. Fidelity mode was easily my preference, as without the slick lighting and real-time reflections, it was a bit of an anticlimax. Despite all that horsepower under the hood, the PS5 is impressively silent, and IGN's testing has pegged it at a virtually inaudible 44 decibels at 58 degrees Celsius in the midst of Spider-Man Miles Morales. It's a refreshing change from my current PS4 Pro. Booting up Marvel's Spider-Man on that makes it sound like it's ready to be catapulted off an aircraft carrier. Unfortunately, one of the PS5's key strengths, its lightning-quick SSD, is also one of its weaknesses. It may say 825GB on the box, but that translates to just 667GB of usable space, which is significantly smaller than the Xbox Series X's 802GB of usable space. There's room for maybe a dozen games, and even fewer if they're anything like current generation behemoths like The Last of Us Part 2 or GTA 5. As I mentioned, you can carry on using any external hard drive you may have already been using in your PS4 and continue to play PS4 games off of it, but PS5 games can only be played when installed on the SSD. And while you can open up the top lid of the console to install an additional SSD for more internal space, there are currently no Sony-approved drives on the market. PS5 games can be stored on an external HDD but need to be copied back to the SSD to play, though the near instantaneous loading times for PS5 games may make this palatable. However, it's worth noting that losing time later to the task of moving stuff around when my SSD invariably fills up may feel a bit like robbing Peter to pay Paul. With a launch lineup dominated by games that are also available on PS4, and on the back of a generation already punctuated with incrementally more powerful hardware revisions like the PS4 Pro, the PS5 doesn't quite land as a knockout punch yet, but it's definitely got the power and speed to be a real contender, although the jury's out on the stamina of that tiny 667GB SSD. However, while the PS5's well-considered UI and blisteringly quick loading times for PS5 games make it a pleasure to use, it's the DualSense controller that's proven to be the surprise haymaker I never saw coming. It truly leaves other controllers feeling primitive in comparison. For more on the PlayStation 5, check out our in-depth review of the DualSense controller and our full unboxing video. For everything else on the new generation of gaming, stick with IGN.
PlayStation.
The old ones perished 1,000 years ago. Their great cities turned to graves. In their place, came new life. And new dangers. I must find a way to stop it. Or it will get worse and worse. Until it destroys us all. There's nothing I wouldn't do to save this world. No depths I won't explore. No secret I won't unlock. No barrier I won't cross. This mission is mine alone. If I falter, if I fail, there won't be anyone left to stop what's coming. Comes. I will be ready.
PlayStation.
Look, I don't know if I'm ready to fly solo.
You gotta take the oath. I promise to do everything in my power to protect this city.
I promise. Whoa.
Qué guapo.
Gracias, mami.
Guys, I wanted to thank you. Both of you.
You need to lay low. Don't trust anybody, and don't take off that mask.
This message is from Roxxon. The underground will stop it.
They need you. Miles, what's the underground doing? They're after Newform. Tinkerer, stop!
Gotta say, I'm disappointed, bud.
Krieger.
You think you can beat the Tinker? Roxxon, you can't!
Every time I think I got this Spider-Man thing figured out, something goes wrong.
Miles, our family doesn't give up.
Whenever you say Spider-Man, you always mean the other one. You're Spider-Man. You can fix this. Your way.
This is my time. I'm seizing the moment cause I gotta go for the time's gone. Ain't scared of the dark cause I'm bringing the light with a night's gone. I shine on. I see it coming, I don't need a sign. It's the moment, I'ma make it mine. This is my time. My time now. My time.
PlayStation.
With the PlayStation 5 finally here, you may be eager to jump right in and play those games you've been dying to get your hands on since they were first revealed. But before you do that, we've compiled a list of settings and features you might not know exist or could easily overlook as you journey into the next generation of gaming. Here are some tips to get the most out of your brand new console. Watch and learn.
You know, most people aren't cut out to be superheroes. Ain't no shame in that.
A built-in microphone is a good solution when you're in between headsets or simply don't have access to one at the moment. The problem with the DualSense's built-in solution is that the vibration intensity and adaptive triggers are automatically set to weak when it's turned on. The haptic feedback is one of the biggest selling points of the DualSense, so if you're using the built-in microphone, you won't be experiencing the full effects of the PS5's brand new controller. By default, the DualSense is set to never turn off without user intervention, even when idle. In the settings, you can change this to 10, 30, or even 60 minutes, allowing your controller to turn off after you've stepped away for extended periods will save you a ton of battery life. If you're tired of having to adjust all your settings each time you launch a new game, such as difficulty, graphical modes, and camera movements, the PS5 has an option to end those pain points. Use the Game Presets option in the Save Data and Game App settings to make sure every game loads up with your preferred style. A simple yet elegant addition to the PS5's UI is the alteration of the PlayStation button on the DualSense controller. Pressing the button will pull up the control center as an overlay on the bottom of the screen, while holding it down will take you directly home. And of course, neither one will exit any game you have loaded. You can change what the Create button does. By default, it'll snap a screenshot with just a press, but if you open up the settings, there you'll be able to map the button to whatever Create option you'd like. This includes mapping it to just take screenshots or to record gameplay clips up to an hour in length. If you're like me and you want to see just how many hours of your life you've thrown away on a particular video game, you can do so from the PlayStation 5 home screen. From there, select your avatar, then your profile, then select games to view your hours played, the percentage you've completed, and more. You can even tab over to your friends' stats and spy on them to see how much time they're pouring into bug snacks. And if you had a PS4 last gen, this retroactively includes hours logged on your last console. By default, pop-up notifications are often suspended during videos, broadcasts, and sometimes games. You may want to leave your message notifications off during videos and broadcasts, but you might want to see other information like your wishlist updates mid-game. Go to Settings, then Notifications to adjust accordingly to make sure your PS5 only bothers you when you want it to. Check out the Save Data and Apps section of your settings and adjust spoiler warnings to stop yourself from seeing anything you haven't yet seen in a game, in case your PSN friends can't help but send you an incredible spoiler-filled screenshot. Likewise, if you're trying to live in Spoiler City, you can toggle these warnings right off and go crazy. For more PlayStation 5 tips and help, be sure to check out how to transfer data from PS4 to PS5 and how to use your PSN account on PS5. And for everything else, you're already in the right place, IGN.
hero's just someone who doesn't give up. Your dad said that. He was right. Now it's your turn. Go be a hero, Miles.
Okay, let's do this.
Feeling just don't stop me now. Try to hate on us. And wear my neck since I'm strong enough. The feeling just don't stop me now. Baby, yeah, we
PlayStation.
Whoa! Taking battle stations. I ain't on vacation. I'm just glowing up, living out aspirations. They're all in second places, but I don't live for praises. I play this life like a game, levels and stages. Let me paraphrases, they'll do a couple pages. Watch this, watch this, watch this. Let me introduce you to a brand new thing. No one gotta prove to. You're looking at the king. This life may choose you. So raise your wings. Watch this, watch this, watch this. This is a brand new thing. They've been calling me mad for 20 years, but it takes a little crazy when you face some fears. No matter what you do, it never ever disappears. But I keep fighting like LeBron James Cavalier.
The other side takes the lead.
Let me introduce you to a brand new thing. No one gotta prove to. You're looking at the king. This life may choose you. So raise your wings. Watch this, watch this, watch this. Watch this, watch this, watch this. This is a brand new thing.
PlayStation.
Hey everybody, Max Scoville here for IGN. It is a very exciting time in the world of video games. We've got a whole bunch of brand new consoles launching, and a lot of you, I'm sure, have them pre-ordered. Now, we have big old reviews of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series up there, along with some of the key accessories, but one that didn't get sent out to the press is the PlayStation 5 Media Remote. And I pre-ordered one for some reason. And it's here! So prepare yourself for probably the least exciting unboxing of anything to come out this generation, but without further ado, let's take a look. Why not? So as you can see, it comes in a box, which is... it's pretty small. They use tape to close it. I have some other remotes here so we can do a size comparison in a moment, but I'm just gonna rip this open. Oh, look at that, the hook thing comes out. There's a handy tab to pull it out. Comes in this sort of inner box here. Oh, look at that. This is exciting. This is really exciting, actually. It comes with batteries. So we got 2 AA batteries. Oh, here it is. Here's the moment of truth. Here's what we get. This is it. This is my first time physically touching a piece of official PlayStation 5 hardware. And it's, wow. Look at that, it's nice. So yeah, you can see I have my my Roku TV remote, which is just the right size to fall right between the couch cushions, and this one looks like it's going to be in some good company. And then here's the other remote for my sound bar, and as you can see, if I'm fumbling around in the dark, they're all pretty close. Now, one thing that is actually pretty interesting about this is that there is the little voice control microphone button at the top. If the PlayStation 5's voice recognition is as cool as it's cracked up to be, this will be handy because I can say, let's watch Netflix or whatever, and it'll hopefully open it up. I would test it, but I don't have a PlayStation yet. Someday, I hope. And for streaming stuff, we've got Disney Plus, Netflix, Spotify, and YouTube. So those are the ones that are definitely on there. There's some other ones coming up, but I'm guessing you probably can't reprogram these to do other things. There's the play. This is it, man. This is the remote. I don't know how do you open it. How does it? There's a button. Oh wow, there's a secret release. That's interesting. Most of the other remotes just, you know, just click open, like you just slide a little box. So clearly, it's not only the PS5's hard drive that is cutting edge, brand new proprietary tech. They figured out a new way for you to put batteries in the remote. And look at that, they're official Sony batteries and everything. What a thrill. I legit didn't know that Sony made batteries. So, there it is. Look at that. There it is. That is the, how do you get it on? You just click it? Is that it? You kidding me? Am I screwing this up? This is a weirdly complicated remote. Do I get it? How do you get it on? Anyway, there you have it. The official unboxing of the PlayStation 5 Media Remote. You saw it here first. It's here. Look at that. I got the cover on, and all it took was a lot of fumbling and trying on camera. Wow. Anyway, for better unboxings than this one, keep it locked to IGN.
PlayStation.
You all right back there? No way.
It appears that the dimensions are collapsing on one another. If we cannot get to...
Right, the ship. I mean, we can't be that far.
I have it in my sights! They have found us, Ratchet.
How do I steer this thing?
Ask nicely.
Slow down, please! Dad's not listening!
The dimensions are weakening considerably.
How bad is it?
Well, it is certainly not good.
Great!
Where are we?
Beats me.
To the depths with ya! How many arms you got, beast? We've been boarded! Get off me, ship, foul creature!
Frank!
Ratchet, we are too late. Ratchet?
Who?
PlayStation.
Over and over, I relive my first moments on this alien planet. The crash. The attack. My death. The crash. The attack. My death. Trapped in this endless cycle. Even death is no escape. Each time I awake, this planet seems somehow different. As if changing. This world is becoming part of me. Infecting my mind. My memories. The longer I spend here, the more I can feel my sanity slip away. But I cannot lose hope. My only choice is to keep fighting. To keep looking for answers. My only hope is to break the cycle. Before the cycle breaks me.
PlayStation.
Resident Evil Village is coming May 7th, 2021, and to give us our first taste, the PS5 now has the Maiden demo, a small slice of what we can expect from the latest in the series. Built, of course, using an updated version of the RE engine, you'll get a taste of what you can expect for next-gen Resident Evil as you escape a dungeon, enter a creepy mansion, and face off against one of the daughters of the Countess. Seeing Village plans to feature a larger open world the designers consider a character in itself, multiple enemies you'll face off against in packs, I'm left feeling both excited, but it leaves me wondering how the engine will keep up after seeing the Maiden demo does indeed dip at points to sub 4K 60 FPS. I have some theories on how they'll address this, which I'll get to in just a moment. First, it should be noted that the demo focuses on the character they call the Maiden, but in Resident Evil Village you'll once again be in the shoes of Ethan Winters as Chris Redfield turns his life upside down.
Why?
You'll encounter enemies who wield weapons, travel in packs, and you'll interact with villagers just trying to survive the day. I predict it not going well for them. This is going to be taxing on the engine if the demo is lurching already, so how could they offer a smoother experience? Producer Peter Fabiano did state that the demo doesn't feature combat or the blocking mechanics, so I'd imagine that this is their chance to show off the engine graphically, and it is quite impressive, but obviously they will adjust as necessary for the full release. And we'll get another look at what they do with a separate new demo coming sometime this spring on all platforms. But back to Maiden. I opened talking about those 60 frames per second dips in combat, but you have to remember that nearly the entire Maiden demo does run at a locked 60 frames per second at native 4K resolution, which is incredibly impressive. But as Maiden doesn't feature a lot of action, it's clearly a technical showcase highlighting what they've been able to do with lighting, resolution, and art direction with a few scares here and there. I've seen this FPS issue brought to light by many on social media already, so how will they handle those dips? Well, during TGS 2020, director Morisama Sato pointed out that he is more concerned with the moment-to-moment experience, stating that he's focused on what do I want to make people feel and when. To accomplish this, the plan is to work with the team to make the appropriate visuals to convey those things. The RE engine used here has also been used for Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and Devil May Cry 5, but for Resident Evil Village and this Maiden demo, the RE engine has been optimized for next-generation consoles. I think we got a peek of what it can do with the recent Devil May Cry 5 push to 120 FPS on Series X and PS5. With that context, I'd imagine that for this demo, subtle dips to 50 frames per second are okay. Looking forward to those massive open areas, I'd imagine the team will utilize dynamic resolution scaling as they have in the past, and dip that base resolution down to 1800p to keep it looking as nice as possible while locking around 60 frames per second. Devil May Cry 5 released earlier this year with next-gen optimizations that allowed it to push all the way up to 120 FPS, so I think that they can solve for this in the coming months. In addition to the frame rate, this demo also features other impressive qualities like subtle ray tracing, which can be noticed on the marbled floors, and according to art director Tomonori Takano, the lighting is completely different from RE7, which they take the opportunity to show off in the first area you'll see after escaping the dungeon. It's really quite beautiful and somehow still exquisitely sinister at the same time. The one aspect that caught me off guard, which I think is an easy fix, was the low texture quality on the doors. You'll notice it when you get close to them, and as they're a staple of the series, with danger lurking just beyond, I hope they get to address it, as they're currently looking a bit muddy. Other than that, the demo sets a lofty expectation for the full release of Village. For previous generation consoles, and noting Digital Foundry's original findings here, Resident Evil 7 targeted 1080p at 60 frames per second and hit around 40 to 60 FPS. But the Xbox One X did hit native 4K at 60 with the PS4 Pro running around 1800p at 60 frames per second. Fast forward to Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3, where both handled frame rate amazingly well and set a bar for expectations on those platforms. Village is developed with next-gen consoles and PC in mind, but the goal is to bring similar satisfying experiences to players on PS4 and Xbox One, according to director Tsuyoshi Kanada. With their history in mind, I would be surprised to see anything less than what they've already shown is their standard of quality. When it's all said and done, this demo really impressed me and gave me a good excuse to dive into all the Resident Evil Village trailers, learn more about the RE engine, and listen to what the developers have said about Village so far. Any engine that can push native 4K at 60 frames per second with ray tracing with HDR lighting is going to knock your socks off if the jump scares don't do it first. I cannot wait to see what launch has in store for the series. I'm your host Destin, and if you've watched this far, thank you for watching. For more on all things gaming, keep it right here on IGN.
They're coming again! PlayStation.
It's too cold to change out here. Dang, I'm late for Mom's rally.
Subway card, check. You got the house key?
Yeah, I got it.
Come on! We're gonna be late! Hey! Dude, I am so filling your suit with snow. Are you still wearing your suit?
Yeah, you know, just in case.
It's gonna be fine. See, this is my favorite part of living in Harlem. Pop-up street fair, best food in the city, awesome music.
Man, this would be great for the last beat I was working on. I should get back into mixing.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So what do you think about Rio Morales? You gonna vote for her?
It's still hard to think of Mom as a politician. She's been a teacher my whole life.
Similar skill sets, right? Corralling people, educating them, making sure they don't throw things at each other.
Hi, I'm Brian Horton, Creative Director at Insomniac Games. We're excited to show you this first look at gameplay from Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. Our story picks up 1 year after the events of the first game, and we find Miles' new home, Harlem, is in danger. Trouble brews while Miles' mom, Rio Morales, leads an election rally. A war between the devious energy corporation Roxxon and the Underground. A high-tech criminal army led by the Tinkerer starts to break out. In this gameplay sequence, captured on PlayStation 5 hardware, the Underground attacks Roxxon, sending the rally into chaos in a fight that spills onto the Braithwaite Bridge, where the Underground tries to steal Roxxon's experimental energy source, Newform. Let's take a look.
Go, go, go! Whoa! Let's not shoot each other, all right?
We're after the new form. Ignore everything else. Get rid of him. Then grab as much as you can carry. Keep him busy.
That bridge is coming down! I have to stop this! People are trapped over there! I have to push past these guys! Where is he? Kill you!
Thank you.
Man!
Those people! They're trapped!
I've got an idea! I need something they can cross! No! I can stop this! Just a little closer!
PlayStation.
Spider-Man Miles Morales isn't just a port of the PS4 version. It's a testament to what the future of gaming can be on the PlayStation 5. Pushing Insomniac's proprietary engine with ray tracing at almost every turn, a nearly locked frame rate across both modes, impressively detailed surface maps and textures, and in fidelity mode, it's all at native 4K. Everything in Spider-Man Miles Morales shows that Insomniac hasn't been resting on their laurels and have instead been pushing their engine's technology to the next level, putting the PS5 to the test. One it passes with ease. This is my technical analysis of Spider-Man Miles Morales. It's been impressive seeing what the first games can do on these new consoles, and one of the newer pieces of technology that's getting a lot of buzz, and rightfully so, is ray tracing. And in Spider-Man Miles Morales, it is everywhere. It's on buildings, in puddles, on cars, and it's even turned on when you enter photo mode on the PS5.
This is crazy tech.
There is no escaping it on this next-gen console, and it's truly stunning. It does so much to make New York appear that much more breathtaking. The technology they used in the past was largely screen-spaced reflections, and it works well for the PS4 Pro, standard PS4, and even the performance mode. But when you start looking at the PS5 fidelity mode side by side with even the PS5's performance mode, you get an idea of what you're missing out on with it turned off. It does a tremendous job of making each scene pop. As a person who's always preferred a higher frame rate, this is one game where you might find yourself truly torn. I've placed the fidelity mode side by side with the 60 FPS performance mode here and slowed it all down to 20% speed to show the difference. There's a true fluidity that you simply lose out on when zipping across New York City on fidelity mode. Selfishly, I want it all, but at the end of the day, this isn't a game where you need the frame rate to enjoy it. You should definitely give it a try for web slinging, but it drops the visuals like ray tracing while still keeping much of the impressive lighting improvements only available on the PlayStation 5. From my measurements, performance mode is doing a great job keeping close to native 4K with dimensions around 1728p, and I found a few higher, so you're not losing much resolution for the frame rate. But ray tracing, when you're on the ground or in an internal area, it just pops right out and wows you. Here's what Insomniac's core technology director Mike Fitzgerald had to say about their 60 FPS performance mode and the choice it gives players.
So we have a temporal solution that we've used for a number of years. And yeah, it's a frame-to-frame temporal method, and we use lots of information about where things are on the screen, how fast they're moving. And that lets us upscale very nicely to 4K. We have a really good method of blending between the resolutions when they flip, so you don't notice it. What that lets us do is really prioritize the frame rate over the resolution. I think the performance mode can go up to just under a full 4K, and then down into the 1700s. We've heard so much of, it's a really hard decision, but I think that's probably a good thing because it means we're giving different options for different, types of players. You hear some people are like, I'm definitely doing the the ray tracing thing, and others are saying, no, I'm definitely doing the 60 frames per second thing. And so it's nice.
SSR, or screen space reflections, are still used on all the other platforms, and it's implemented quite well. One place all modes use that is on the water, and you'd have to be looking really close to see the reflections disappear in the distance as you're zipping past at 70 miles an hour. And on Windows, the cube maps as you climb up are slightly more noticeable, as on occasion they won't reflect something like the giant Avengers building behind me. But again, you don't notice any of this unless you're making an analysis video like I am, so the SSR does a ton to make up for what you're missing out on at higher frame rates, or on older consoles. Speaking of frame rates, that same 33 millisecond and double frame issue crops up again, and it's present on all versions of Spider-Man, even the PS5 version at native 4K, and on performance mode. Here's what Insomniac had to say about this frame rate issue.
One thing we do is we're really careful about camera cuts. We want to make sure you don't see cloth pops and things settling and things popping in afterwards, or any of the simulation type stuff that you usually do frame to frame. We don't want to do the camera cut and then have things be in a bad state, right? So a lot of what we do is pre-camera cut, simulate all the cloth in the scene for an extra frame or two, let some lighting settle, and try and do it all behind the scenes before we show another one. And I bet there's some cuts in there where there's, we've ramped up a lot of the amount of cloth we're using in the game and stuff like that. And I'm almost certain that's what is happening there.
And while you see these flutters in my analysis, it's literally one frame between camera cuts, and it's nearly imperceptible during gameplay on all platforms. The thing that surprised me even more is that from the base PS4 up through the PS5, they've achieved an almost locked 30 frames per second when you're web slinging in the open world, and if you choose to play at 60 FPS on the PS5, it's going to be locked at 60, and it's going to stay there. But if one platform struggled to stay there, it was the base PS4. The color range seems to be quite reduced, and while web slinging through the open world, you only saw minor drops that you don't notice as you play, but they're there, so I'm calling them out. Regardless, no matter what platform you would play on, it seems that Insomniac has pushed every pixel they can to give you the best experience your hardware can offer, and that deserves kudos. If you're playing on the PS5, native 4K at 30 frames per second is simply stunning. Here's what Insomniac had to say about developing for the PS4 versus the PlayStation 5.
Yeah, so part of our work on this game was building in a robust sort of scaling system to have stuff run on all the different types of hardware. We have a lot of PS4 players on the base PS4, on the PS4 Pro, and we really wanted this game to be an awesome example of, tech on that hardware as well, and not only look at the PS5. The PS5 let us do more dynamic lights, obviously the ray tracing stuff that it's been focused on, but really just more nuanced dynamic lighting in general. And our lighting artists spent a lot of time in there saying, okay, we can turn these ones on for the Pro and these ones on for the 5. And okay, we need to compensate with this on the 4 if we don't have that in. And then HDR comes up, so there's all these different combinations of things. And we have some tools to help them manage that.
Diving into some other technical aspects of Spider-Man, we can take a look at the character models on the PS5, which promise to have improved skin shading and spline-based hair, so it moves more naturally.
Actually, the fur coat that Miles has on the subway in the opening is a really good example of this. That actually uses all this strand hair, and as you watch him walk around, you can see all the strands simulated.
The city also has several improvements, including more characters on screen at any given time and a longer draw distance. I was able to catch their LOD system in action at a few points, like on this long city street. Their system is quite genius, actually, as they revealed what's going on the PS4 version. The further away you get from the camera, the lower the level of detail gets for everything. If you happen to be walking along the ground and you squint, you'll notice it, like with these buildings in the distance that transform to a higher level of detail as you get closer. In addition, another genius tactic is how they delay loading the higher resolution items and things that aren't needed as you swing through the city. It's all delayed in the pipeline as you're swinging, but when you land, it all starts loading in, as outlined during their GDC talk. But as a normal player, you don't notice any of this happening, and that's by design. It's kind of the magic of what Insomniac does. The added motion blur, chromatic aberration, and film grain all works together to make the game look more like a film. And now they've continued adding to all that with ray tracing, improved character models, and new technology on the PS5 that allows them to expand what they can render in any given scene. And the loading times are next to nothing when compared with older platforms. So all that means more textures, more people, more cars, more tech, and higher levels of detail in each scene. I will say this though, No matter what platform you play on, even the base PS4, the game runs quite well, but the PS5 fidelity option should not be missed, especially if you want to see everything an engine like this can do for an open world game. The frame rate option is also impressive. Insomniac nailed everything here. Spider-Man Miles Morales sets an impressive standard for open world games on the PlayStation 5, and all the other platforms. This is my second performance analysis piece for IGN, and I hope you liked it. I've been working to make better comparisons for IGN, so if you like this one, consider checking out my look at Gears 5 and the technology they've implemented to make it run at 4K 60 frames per second with the Xbox Series X. These take a ton of time and research for me to do, so with all honesty, just thank you for watching. Stay tuned for my next performance analysis across both next-gen platforms, where we'll focus on a certain Megaton shooter I'm sure you all love.
While supply shortages continue to restrict entry into the next console generation, those lucky enough to secure a PS5 have a solid launch window lineup to explore. To help you sort through all the best games currently available on the system, that includes cross-generation and PS4 games that look and play even better on the PS5, these are the 10 best games to play on the system right now. Ghost of Tsushima on PS4 offers something for both players who have already played through Jin's journey and those who have yet to enjoy Sucker Punch's stunning vision of feudal Japan. Now running at a Sakai steel-sharp 60 frames per second, Ghost's already thrilling combat has never felt better, and its unmatched photo mode is a joy to use. Plus, there's now the free Legends update to play through, which culminates in a visually striking and challenging raid that's one of the best co-op experiences available on the PS5 at launch. Revisiting 2018's God of War on PS5 is an absolute must, and if you somehow missed out on it on PS4, there's no better way to experience it for the first time. While the PS5 doesn't overhaul the visuals or add any new effects like ray tracing, the stable 60 frames per second it runs in on performance mode makes combat even more of a joy than it already was, though you will have to settle for the experience in 1080p. Even so, the action is still as satisfying as ever, and its world and story remain some of the best that gaming has to offer.
We're gonna fight that?
We have no choice.
While Sackboy: A Big Adventure foregoes the creation side of the Little Big Planet series, its focus on being a fun, charming platformer pays off in a delightful adventure that can be played both solo or co-op. Sumo Digital's level variety keeps things fresh, so one moment you're riding a train through a moving level that has you occasionally jumping off to grab collectibles, while the next you're grooving through a level set to Bruno Mars's Uptown Funk. Yes, really. And as with most games we've seen on PS5, it's a visual treat.
So what do you say? Ready to make history? Of course you are.
The Pathless marries a simple but elegant and completely engrossing movement mechanic with a gorgeous open world. Running, jumping, and gliding through developer Giant Squid's forests, rocky plateaus, and snow-capped mountains is a treat thanks to the main bow and arrow gameplay relying less on precision accuracy and more on empowering you to carve a fun path through the terrain. It's a world that encourages exploration and satisfies your curiosity, making the destinations you reach as fun as the journey itself thanks to a host of clever puzzles. Add in a handful of boss battles that are part epic chase scene and part Zelda-esque showdown, all backed by a moving epic score, and you've got one of the most intriguing launch titles on the PS5. Developer Young Horses continues its absurdist streak with Bugsnax, an environmental/creature-based puzzle game that has you snapping photos and catching tasty critters. Underneath Bugsnax's cute and quirky exterior is a heartwarming story full of ominous twists and turns as you try to rebuild a settlement by fulfilling folks' requests. Each returned resident means another person to interview for the story you're writing about Bugsnax, Snacktooth Island, and, ultimately, what happened to Elizabeth Megafig, who invited you to the island to begin with. Its progression systems continue to pique our curiosity too, which makes the gameplay loop enticing throughout. And Bugsnax's big reveal, no spoilers we promise, doesn't disappoint.
Oh baby, what a bridge!
Marvel's Spider-Man was already one of the best superhero games ever made, but the PS5 remaster elevates it to a new level. Insomniac's visual update brings the look of the adventure up to par with the brand new Miles Morales. The addition of ray tracing with 4K resolution and HDR support makes any time of day so beautiful that you'd be forgiven for forgetting this wasn't running on code originally developed for the PS5. Add in the quality of life improvements Spidey got post-launch, new accessibility options, photo mode updates, and all the DLC episodes. This is the definitive way to play one of the PS4's best games. The DualSense is one of the most defining characteristics of the PS5, as the nuanced haptic feedback and strategically used adaptive triggers create a level of immersion that feels genuinely special. Nowhere is that tech better showcased than in Astro's Playroom, which is, quite literally, designed to show off the capabilities of the DualSense controller. But this would-be tech demo is also a fantastic game in its own right, with a delightful set of worlds to explore that all celebrate a different facet of the PS5 and the different eras of PlayStation software and hardware. Astro's Playroom reminds players why they've loved PlayStation while giving them a reason to fall in love all over again. Its solid platforming, fun environmental puzzles, and enticing set of collectibles will have you gunning for the platinum and getting it in no time. Assassin's Creed Valhalla has redefined the rules of the franchise yet again with the ability to sack monasteries, build up your budding Norse settlement, and uncover unique gear and powerful abilities. The PS5 beautifully captures the icy mountains of Norway and the bending rivers of England alike in stunning 4K, and the ability to travel between the war-torn kingdoms quicker than you can sound the horn for a raiding party remains impressive throughout. Bluepoint Games had some high expectations to meet with the PS5 remake of Demon's Souls. Not only was it an anticipated remake of a beloved and landmark game, but also the first major showcase of what a dedicated PS5 exclusive game could look like. Fortunately, Bluepoint delivered, and Demon's Souls is not only jaw-droppingly gorgeous, but it's also incredibly faithful to the source. It's handily one of the deepest, richest, and most challenging experiences currently found on the console. Though not a full-blown sequel, this standalone follow-up sends Peter Parker on vacation and leaves his young spider apprentice Miles Morales to look after New York. Building on the rock-solid foundations of Insomniac's first game, New York has been gorgeously blanketed with snow, holiday cheer, and next-gen polish. Our hero has a few more spider powers at his disposal than Peter Parker did, and these are cleverly adapted into new gameplay mechanics that, while they don't reinvent the wheel, they put enough of a spin on it to make it feel fresh, sometimes literally thanks to the DualSense controller. It doesn't feature as lengthy of a campaign or as many colorful villains as 2018's Spider-Man, but Miles Morales' story has just as much charm and heart as its predecessor, possibly more. Its tagline of "Be Greater" set a high bar, but Miles Morales somersaults over it with ease. Those are our favorite games to play on the PS5 so far, but we'll be updating our list as more are released this year. For everything else PlayStation, stay right here at IGN.
You ever feel like you're just waiting for a sign? To to do that thing you've always meant to do. Sometimes I feel like I'm just standing on the edge of doing great things. But something's holding me back. Maybe it's just nerves. Maybe it's the fear that I'll never be as good as what I imagine, when I'm still just standing on the edge. But if we've got nothing else to lose, might as well jump.
PlayStation.
Captain, I've got eyes on a Fisk construction site and their equipment's covered in dust.
Just there for show?
That's my bet. I'm gonna take a closer look.
They think the boss can't run things from inside?
What I hear is true. Pretty soon Osborn's gonna wish he'd remembered who his friends are.
Keep an eye out for Spider.
Heads up.
Sweet dreams.
Come on! Doesn't take a genius to know who did this. How's he doing that?
Everyone down! I'm gonna blow your brains out. I hate this crap!
Keep him on the ground or we don't stand a chance.
PlayStation. PlayStation. PlayStation.
Remedy love time. Bullet, travel, or otherwise. In Control, you again can defy the laws of physics and even time itself. But the last gen Northlight engine was a hungry hippo on those base consoles. Now that brand new hardware has landed in the SX and the PS5, the shackles are off for some unbridled ray tracing or 60 FPS action. Or just one of those on the S. The question is though, how much pain for that gain? Let's find out. The three consoles in question all have one mode in common, a performance mode that targets a buttery smooth 60Hz update, double that of all console releases prior. The Series S comes in with a 1600x900p target resolution, fixed and not dynamic from all my counts. Now unsurprisingly, ray tracing is not possible here, largely due to memory constraints. Both the X and the 5 stretch their pixel pouches to 2560x1440, again appear fixed in both modes. Using Northlight temporal A8 reconstruction, it pushes that up to a 4K output, and we first saw this temporal A8 in Quantum Break, but here, like other parts of the engine, it has been updated or tweaked for that next round of hardware. It has a great deal of weight to carry thanks to the game's art style and its strong specular highlights, contrasting tones, thin lines and abundant SSR or ray traced reflections. It delivers a confident equilibrium of maintaining texture detail sharpness but reducing the sub-pixel temporal stability, even in movement, something you do a great deal of. It's not the best we've seen, with some areas becoming quite noisy and they can break up worse on the Series S. That reconstructed nature of the ray trace reflections can be noticed here in photo mode or just look at it in glass. You notice that delayed trail as you move the camera and that resolution breaks down to its base, and then when you stop it catches up and that previous frame converges with the current frame into a fuller, cleaner object. Something similar in the rasterized image also that uses that temporal AA to reconstruct the image back up to 4K. The ray tracing is very effective, with an excellent combination of surface normals, microfacet distortion, with a good roughness cut off using stochastic samples within marble, metals and brass surfaces. Something the lower ray trace reflections on consoles can actually help with at times, making the surface look more realistic with a little rougher, more diffuse surface level than the higher, shinier level on PC with its better quality ray trace reflections. But even the Fresnel, the expensive Fresnel in transparent reflections, is factored in, with oblique glancing angles heightening her reflection and then fading away into the objects behind as that angle of incidence is reduced. They look great, and the BV8 structure does hold a great deal of objects. These are all dynamically allocated at certain sector points, it seems. The curvature of objects is also factored into the reflection, giving accurate distortion. You can see this on chairs, bins, and every reflective surface that has a specular level above a certain roughness reflects everything around, and this helps with things like bounce lighting or the colour of the floor bouncing up on tables and metal legs and chairs. Now these can be cooled within a shorter range of the camera frustum and occasionally are loaded without a base albedo map within, but these are rare on the objects within the BVH. The blend of the reflective surface diffuse colour also factors into that reflection, which all adds to the excellent physically based materials the game has. Ray tracing simply adds a great deal to these moments when you have time to notice. I must note though, the SX has some issues on that BVH level, being lost when it appears to be frustum aligned, causing your character to disappear at points or flutter past like an 80s pop video. Minor, but it is present. I tried this on the PS5, but this never occurred, so it seems to be specific to the DXR API the Xbox uses and not an inherent Northlight engine issue. I also tested this on PC, and the other issue you can notice here is you get dual reflections on the PS5 in these ray trace reflections on glass when there is two surfaces, the glass itself at the front and then those brass strips behind, so you get a double reflection in this mirror. You do not get that on the Xbox or even the PC version, so again that does point to a little difference in terms of how they're utilising that Northlight engine and the specific API that's being used on the PS5 around ray tracing. But generally they are very similar across the board, and as you can see with the reflections here, the PC version on the same medium settings, which I've compared here with my RTX 2070 overclocked, so it's more like a 2070 Super. The level of detail, the draw distance of those BVH objects, everything is pretty much identical. The only difference is the PC version runs at a higher resolution, probably around double, but it's hard to spot in action. But when you're staring into the screen, that breakdown as the camera moves is obviously less apparent. And to wrap this section up, we can actually have a quick test using the photo mode for that ray trace reflections on the consoles. When you go to photo mode, it unlocks the frame rate, so we can see beyond that 30 FPS cap that this mode has. A quick test here in this room with high reflectance, lots of specular roughness levels and a large BVH grid of objects in the background gives us a little bit of a delta test. Don't take this as gospel, but it is a good test. What you can see here is that this scene, spinning the camera around in the same spot in this room, the Series X holds a locked 60, not dropping one single frame, whereas the PS5 can dip somewhere between 16% and 5% delta as the camera moves around. Now remember, this is not the same as playing the game. There's no dynamic objects, there's no explosions, there's no CPU load at all really, there's no data being streamed in and out, so it's not really indicative of how the game would look. But on a pure rasterization and then ray tracing level, it does give us a view under the hood in terms of how the hardware is handling ray tracing, and that's because the more CUs and more TMUs, irrespective of clock speed, does point to the fact that the Series X should be better slightly at ray tracing, and this test proves it. But again, there's more to discuss around the APIs, the construction, and just how the ray tracing is working, but it's a good test nonetheless. Just as a quick comparison as well, comparing this to my 2070 Super, again on the same settings I can compare with consoles, again those reflections factored in, spinning the camera around in photo mode in the exact same spot. Then the PS5 is slightly faster than the 2070 Super, and the Series X is obviously faster than them both. So it does give you a good example of just how good these consoles are already at doing ray traced reflections across multi-platform titles like this.
Call me Jesse. Okay, Jesse, full lockdown. It seems to have spread everywhere and to everyone not protected by an HRA. And, extraordinarily, you. You are the director, and that makes you special by definition. Trench is dead. Shot. Ah.
Worth it though in comparison to the other modes, higher frame rate and much faster input times. And obviously on the S this is all you've got. Well, it will depend on your preference. Once ray tracing is off, the game defaults to screen space reflections, which often seem more stochastic than the ray trace ones do, and they do not benefit as much from that TAA. In action though, it can be harder to notice the loss, with only certain points in the game which lack those decent cube maps to fall back on. These can stand out at times. No, instead the game uses sign distance fields, almost like a point cloud approximation of the surrounding geometry, and these blend with the SSR reflections on rougher marble floors or brushed metal doors, and they actually come close enough to convince. But when you need to check your hair and lippy, they do not hold a candle to ray tracing, obviously. And again though, like Quantum Break-like combat, it really benefits from that 16 millisecond frame cost reduction, as do the input times. That 60 mode feels so much better than ray tracing mode, and at times I actually struggle to play over the 60 mode, as it may or may not affect you though. This might be different for you personally, but for me I definitely felt the difference. Which nicely brings us into performance and how all versions stack up. Now, as noted, the last gen versions target the same 30 FPS the ray trace mode does, but with lesser effects and no ray tracing. The new ray tracing mode on both consoles is vastly better and cleaner, if not that much better on input times, but holding that 33 millisecond frame time pretty much all the time on the PS5, and it does that most of the time on the Series X. Except there are those deltas coming from those streaming stutters when you move into new sector points rather than in gameplay, although sometimes it can happen as you're moving around the combat area. Now this is obviously largely helped by the PS5's I/O construction. It's alleviated workloads away from the CPU and that SSD. Something else the PS5 boosts is almost half the install size thanks to Oodle texture compression. It only takes 25 GB on your PS5 versus 42 GB on both Xbox machines. Now all versions include the DLC pack as well, and this translates to a smaller footprint, hardly any stutters at all, or practically none, with minor ones, but they can crop up more often than I would like on the Xbox, along with slightly faster loading times on the Xbox Series X. Again minor, but every little help. But as boring as that 30 FPS mode is from an analysis perspective, it's great news for us as we play. You do get these stutters in the 30 mode and the 60 mode on the Series X, and I'll touch on what I think is happening there in a minute. But the 60 FPS mode has slightly more to discuss, not least of which is that Series S version. The game itself targets 60 FPS, but again it's locked at 1600 by 900, and it does appear to have some reductions in some of the textures and details and filtering. Not a massive amount, but you can certainly notice it on cutscenes and certain parts when you're comparing them side by side. You can also notice the lower resolution, so it highlights the shimmer, the breakup, and that stochastic noise can get a little bit noisy at certain points, specifically at that lower resolution. On a 4K screen it stands out much more than a 1080p one, but just be aware. But generally it holds on to that 60 FPS very, very well. You can run through areas, and occasionally the stuttering is pretty much identical to the Series X, sometimes worse, sometimes better, but it's really synonymous of the entire game engine running on the hardware and how it's been constructed. The Series S is a pretty consistent 60. There are points when you can have long views, lots of geometry draw and alpha effects that can then bring that frame rate down to a consistent 40 at some of the heavier points you can see on screen, but it never really prolongs for too long, and generally you're somewhere in those mid 50s, so it still feels very fast, very smooth and very consistent. And overall it's a decent rendition of the game minus those ray trace options, but it still has that most important for me, that 60 FPS mode. Moving into the Series X and the PS5, the comparison here again is pretty close. They have largely dip occasionally, very minor 33 millisecond skips into the next refresh cycle when explosions happen close on, or physics collide, or objects are very heavy in the screen, and that frustum is filled with effects, alphas and transparencies. That can cause a couple of dips down, but they're not that far apart in this fully rasterized mode. Maybe ever so slightly better to the Series X, but you wouldn't notice it outside this comparison. The unfortunate thing, flipping the ray tracing test on its head, is there is consistent stutters and judders at points throughout the game. Again, consistent in when you traverse the game, when you run through it. Most of the combat sections, once they're loaded in, stay consistent at that 60 FPS. When you're travelling through areas, you can get these stutters you can see here, and that can bring the frame rate down to somewhere into the low 40s. It can be very brief and it judders as it goes through those sections, and again, this can be frustrating at times if you sometimes get it compounded on top of each other, and you feel it far more often than these 1 or 2 frame drops throughout combat. So it is the worst performing title because of the fact it dips down in these levels, which is a shame. But why is it doing this? Now, it's not because of that magic SSD, it's not because of all of those things that I've just spoke about in terms of the I/O construction specifically. Now, what I think it is an answer we can find over on the PC version. The Northlight engine is a very impressive engine. It's almost a perfect technical showcase of all the things the tech engineers want to push into a title. Ray trace reflections, huge physics, destruction, fluid-based simulation on alpha effects, so many particles and much more going on, that actually it's still a CPU bound title often, specifically in those ray tracing modes, because that puts a much higher overhead on the CPU, but also in the game itself. It can be bound to one single thread. Not an unknown, many titles are multi-threaded, but you have a worker thread that owns the rest of the game engine. And here on PC you can see on my Ryzen 2700, just defaulting here to 3300, you can see it can max out 100% at times on one single thread. Now, unless Remedy have made drastic changes to this construction and single-threaded limitation, which I highly doubt in the new Northlight release here, then it's probably an issue that carries over to the console versions. But because of that PS5's construction and the fact that pretty much everything to do with moving data in and out of load of RAM is actually taken away from the CPU, in addition to the API being slightly lighter on that console than the DirectX version on Xbox, then likely these issues are not hitting it where they are hitting it on the Series X and the Series S. Hence, we get these brief but occasional stutters that crop up when things are instantiated into RAM, objects are drawn in, areas are closed off for kill rooms, and that's a standard practice of engines to keep data moving freely in and out of RAM, and there is a cost to that. Now bearing in mind that when you use ray tracing, that also increases the cost of the CPU. So that BVH grid, that construction of objects that are in different boxes that are then scanned when the ray tracing goes out from the screen, all of this has a factor on the game. So if we take the comparison earlier on the photo mode, that had no load on the game at all, just general ray tracing and rasterization loads, perfect GPU test. And this is the thing about the game, it's a great example of how these two consoles actually differ and strengthen in different areas. You can lose 16, maybe 20% in ray trace modes on the PS5, but you can lose exactly the same 16-20% in these points when it's loading data in and out in combat. And it's quite refreshing to see a game that enables us to get a good view into the hardware and how it's constructed. But generally, that 60 FPS mode on all consoles is the one that I would choose. I'm not a big fan of the art style, I think it's a bit dull, I don't think it utilises the ray trace reflections very well, and it's one of the reasons why I wouldn't recommend the ray trace reflections for me, because I don't think they stand out unless you're staring into the screen and looking at them. But if you are a fan, I think there's a secret third option here for Remedy to just turn on. Based on our tests previously between the consoles and PC, I think a 1080-60 mode would be perfectly capable on both machines, with likely a very similar performance metric to that rasterization mode. But if you want to run around, shoot things, pick objects up and then check your lippy, it might be the perfect compromise to get the most out of Control. If you like this and these deep dives into this performance analysis across consoles and that powerful PC, then obviously keep it IGN, and I'll catch you on the next one.
There's some very unexpected developments in your future. Shocking events that will change the course of your life!
That last part might have been a hair dramatic, but there's lots of awesome updates and additions coming to the Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time experience on PlayStation 5. Hey everyone, I'm Lou Studdard, creative producer at Toys for Bob. I'm here to give you the feature rundown on Crash Bandicoot 4 on PS5. That includes 4K at 60 frames per second, adaptive triggers, 3D audio, and more.
Let's make this fun.
Picking up where Crash Bandicoot Warp left off, in Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, we find the evil masterminds Neocortex and Dr. Entropy escaping a once-thought inescapable interdimensional prison, leaving giant holes in the universe. What follows is a mind-bending adventure for Crash and his marsupial pals. We designed Crash Bandicoot 4 to leap off your screen, brimming with bold, vibrant environments and characters. Crash Bandicoot has always looked pretty suave, but wait until you see him spinning heads in native 4K at 60 frames per second. With the weight of the universe on your shoulders, and probably some errands to run, there's little time to wait on loading screens. The DualSense wireless controllers bring adaptive triggers to your fingertips, so you can feel the blast of Neocortex's DNA-changing ray gun, or feel the grip when you grapple with Tana's hookshot. Hold on tight when you feel the boost of Crash's jetboard, and really feel the suck when you vacuum his Dingodile. Looking to get fully immersed in the Crash Bandicoot universe? Crank it up to 11 and take your audio into an all-new dimension with enhanced 3D audio. Achieving the infamous 106% completion is the sign of a true Bandicoot master. But should our genetically mutated marsupial lose his way? Leverage PlayStation 5 activity cards to track your progress and hit your goals for things like time trials, flashback levels, and boss fights. I bet Entropy wishes he had that. Even bring your incomplete save over from the PlayStation 4 and use the activity cards to get to 106%. Oh, and one more thing. If you own the PS4 version of the game, an upgrade option is available. Check out the PlayStation blog for full details. Whether it's your first playthrough or your 100th, there's no better time to experience Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time on PlayStation 5.
Welcome back, Crash. The gang's all here on today's new edition of State of Play. We've got some great updates lined up for you. first, let's check out the latest on an eagerly anticipated game coming to the PS5 console this spring from PlayStation Studios.
Hey everyone, we at Housemarque are excited to give you this sneak peek at Returnal. In Returnal, you will play as Celine, an Astra scout, who crash lands on an alien planet, Atropos, after receiving a mysterious signal, White Shadow. Players will explore this inscrutable, dark planet in search for answers and unfold mysteries, which may point to a larger force at play. Dashing and quickly maneuvering your way above and around enemies is key to survival in Returnal. With the large variety of enemies and the vast number of unique movesets each possess, combat situations prove challenging no matter what the circumstances are. Death is only the beginning. Every time you die and restart, the world will change. The map will be different, enemies will appear in new locations and in differing numbers, so you have to think fast and adapt.
The environment.
Here you can see the use of the lightning alt-fire, which is great for crowd control. This is one of many alt-fires that you can acquire in the game. You will stumble across mysterious devices that can grant rewards to the player. These will vary from weapons, consumables, and upgrades, and they can completely change your playstyle and make each cycle feel unique. Besides the intense combat, Returnal also has a deep and engaging narrative. We allow players to piece together the puzzle that is the story of Celine, as they venture deeper and deeper into Atropos and into her personal nightmare.
That can't be here.
I think I am reliving my memories in that house, but not fully. They're corroded. Some parts are missing, others seem manufactured. But I can remember the torment, feeling like I was losing my mind. There's no comfort here. No safe space.
Exactly as I left it.
Returnal lands on April 30th, and it's developed by the talented team at Housemarque. Next, let's take a closer look at a high-impact new PS4 game called Knockout City.
Hi, I'm Josh from Bellin Studios. We're an indie developer based in upstate New York, and we recently announced Knockout City, a team-based multiplayer action game for PS4 where rival crews settle their scores with epic dodgeball battles. Knockout City is easy to pick up and play, but there's a lot of depth here for those who've got the skills. In our 1v1 face-off mode, you'll go head-to-head in a constantly shrinking battleground, relying on your reflexes and abilities to knock out an opponent. A well-timed catch powers up the ball, making it easier to land a hit. Use trick shots to lob a ball over a ledge or hook it around a corner. Fake a throw to mess up your opponent's timing and knock them out before they can recover. When you're in a tough spot with a ball flying your way, a last-second dodge is the difference between getting knocked out and staying in the fight. Keep your wits about you and outplay your opponent to bring home a win. Let's jump into Team KO, our 3v3 mode. Teamwork makes the dream work in Knockout City. If your crew is outmatched, a well-coordinated team can still dominate. We're playing in Back Alley Brawl, a new map that you'll find in our upcoming crossplay beta. The special ball for this match is the Sniper Ball, which locks onto targets from far across the map and wham! You can take them out before they have a chance to react. Beyond special balls, each map features a unique mechanic. In Back Alley Brawl, you can hop into a tube and make a quick getaway, or use them to sneak up on your opponents. Caught empty-handed? You can literally become the ball, a new weapon for your teammate. Or risk it all. Charge up a teammate, launch them high into the air with an ultimate throw, and they'll land in a huge instant KO explosion. The team here at Velen has been obsessed with building this world over the last 4 years. Knockout City is coming out May 21st, and we'd love your help in our final stretch of development. Rally your crew and sign up for our crossplay beta at knockoutcity.com to play early on PlayStation. See you soon, brawlers!
Time for something new. Here's your first look at an upcoming PS5 game from the team at Slow Clap. That was the debut of Sifu, coming to the PS5 console later this year. Now let's get an update on Solar Ash, an epic new PS5 adventure from Heart Machine.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Preston, Creative Director of Heart Machine. You might know us as the team behind Hyperlight Drifter. Today, I'm here to show you the first peek at gameplay for our new title, Solar Ash. Solar Ash is a huge, stylish 3D platformer focused on speed, movement, and fluidity. The game is set inside a giant black hole, known as the Ultra Void, which has been consuming everything in its path. You play as Ray, a daring Void Runner who has decided to venture into this terrifying anomaly as a last-ditch effort to save her homeworld. Ray is extremely agile, able to speed across the world with abilities akin to skating. On the ash and clouds, she can quickly cover great distances in our huge world. At its core, Solar Ash is a game about movement, and Ray has everything she needs to flow through the dangerous and unique world. As you journey to save your planet, you'll find yourself face to face with grotesque and violent creatures. Our combat system is simple, fast, and fluid, built to empower players and encourage flow. As you explore the Ultra Void, enemy encounters will scale to greater and greater sizes. Some of these creatures require speed and precise timing to defeat. Ray will eventually need to face the massive sentinels of this void, wretched, starved beasts that hold the key to her quest. Solar Ash is Heart Machine's vision of the adventure platformer. The giant spaces, the feel of movement, the flow of combat, and the high-stakes battles atop enormous beasts all come together to bring players something we think is incredibly unique, and more importantly, fun. This game is a labor of love for everyone on the Heart Machine team. We're excited to bring Solar Ash to PS5 and PS4 later this year.
If you're a fan of scary games, this next one is for you.
When I first found you, you were nothing. You were small, pathetic. But now, you are more. Are you ready?
Gregory, we can get you out of here. You and me together. They won't stop hunting you. None of them will stop hunting you. We have to get you out by morning.
Do as I say! You will bring me what I want! And if you fail me, then you will, both of you, burn!
There is more going on here than you realize.
That was a chilling new look at Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. Up next, let's take a tour of Oddworld Soulstorm.
Hi, I'm Lauren Lanning, Creative Director at Oddworld Inhabitants. Today, I'm going to take you on a brief tour of our newest game, Oddworld Soulstorm.
They've always known you would come. Do you know why you have?
In Soulstorm, you reprise the role of Abe, accidental hero turned unlikely leader of an emerging revolution, as you do battle through weird and wonderful environments in an effort to escape the all-powerful and eternally greedy Gluckins. We really wanted to bring this world to life with what we call 2.9D platforming, which adds much more depth and immersion for the player. This sense of connection is also reinforced through the use of the DualSense's haptic feedback, as you'll now be able to feel Abe's heartbeat in high alert and suspenseful situations. There are well over 1,000 fellow Mudokons that you must try to save along the way. But they are far more than helpless workers looking to be saved. When used effectively, you'll be able to solve puzzles, harness their combined energy, and be given the tools they need to fight alongside you. And there will be times when the extra hands will be needed as you face off against an array of heavily armed enemies that will stop at nothing to find and end Abe once and for all. In order to stand a chance against this much larger threat, we gave Abe the ability to scavenge, loot, and pickpocket items from his surroundings and use them to craft an impressive arsenal of his own that he can share with others. You can also play as a non-lethal pacifist or an agent of chaos. We wanted you to have the choice. But there is one iconic ability for our shamanic protagonist, Possession. This mystical power allows you to take control of your foes and use their strengths and weapons against them, or use them to gain access to paths still ahead. The Oddworld universe is a diverse place, and this means that there are some environments and situations that require a little more thought, patience, and stealth. You'll find dark and dangerous caves, heavily guarded industrial sites, and ancient forgotten lands. Here, we've built lots of opportunities for you to test your skills and find different ways to handle things. It won't be easy. If being hunted by an army backed by a shady and wealthy organization isn't bad enough, there are also more dangers in the forms of natural obstacles, ancient traps, trials against swarming dark creatures, and industrial hazards that must be dodged, crossed, and avoided. Ultimately, Abe's journey is one of hope, freedom, and truth. There is a rich and engaging narrative to discover in a world full of lies, and we've been able to bring our characters to life like never before. In true Oddworld fashion, your actions in-game will decide the fate of Abe and all those you manage to liberate along the way, and we can't wait to see what you will do.
That was the latest on Oddworld Soulstorm. And here's some exciting news. Active PlayStation Plus members will get the PS5 version for no extra cost, starting in April. Moving on, it's time to catch up with Kena Bridge of Spirits, a gorgeous new adventure we last saw in the June PS5 showcase.
The rats seem quite fond of you. They're usually timid. Something tells me you did not come to our village looking for forest creatures.
Hello, Spirit. I seek passage to the Sacred Mountain Shrine.
Our village is bound to the shrine's energy. But that power faded long ago. Trapped spirits linger here, tangled in the tragedies of our past. You must help these spirits if you wish to reach the mountain shrine.
It's okay. You have to go now. Move on. The path of a spirit guide is a lonely one.
Now let's settle in for a stylish new look at Deathloop, a PS5 first-person shooter developed by the team at Arcane.
Colt.
What?
You'll never, ever break this loop.
There's no never here. Just you, me, and the rest of these maniacs.
Bring it, baby.
This is Ramblin' Frank's Matinee. This
This little ditty goes out to the handsome asshole trying to break our loop. Colt, the visionaries are ready to dance. Are you?
Toxic illusion, falling deeper spiral time. Static delusion. This is where we do or die. And I've been here before, face to face with the gun, up against all the odds, and I'm the only one. Oh, I've been here before, it must be true. This is
Stay still for like a second!
What the?
Die already! You're doomed! Somebody's feeling feisty.
Oh, I've been here before. It must be true. It must be true. This is death. At the beginning of the end again. It's deja.
Where you been hiding? Boy, do I got a bone to pick with you. Let's do it again tomorrow.
What to do when the bullet is the same, but the kill is always new.
Song's over, people. And so is Ramblin' Frank. The rest of you motherfuckers are next.
Before we leave, how about a huge update for one of 2020's most celebrated games?
Cloud! Quickly!
Barrett!
Give me a break!
Jesse! Barrett!
Where you been?
Tifa! Help me!
Come on, let's push it past the red line! Now it's my turn! Got you, lethal force right here!
A touching reunion.
Well, guys, your girl finally made it to Midgar. My name is Yuffie, materia hunter and elite special forces operative for the new Wutai government. We'll prove to our common enemy that Wutai is not to be trifled with. Members of Avalanche, we got this.
I'm back.
Ah, there you are. Someone's been expecting you. What took you?
Sorry about that. Anyway, it's nice to meet you. I'm Sonon Kusakabe. Where's Cloud?
We lost him.
You what?
He will be okay, though, right?
Well, of course he will.
They're the ones who blew up the reactors. Cool. Should we say hi?
No, better not. After what they've done, you gotta assume Shinra's on their tail.
Look, a Moogle!
Stop! We gotta help.
Probably get moving.
Got it.
Whatever it is they're planning, you're better off out of it.
We deserve what's coming to them.
Yeah, they do, but I'm not your sister.
There you are.
Who are these jerks?
No clue. It just appeared.
Now, let the hunt begin. Get down here, Merc.
That's how ninjas do it.
Yep. That was the reveal of Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, coming to the PS5 console later this year. And that's our show. We hope you're as excited as we are for what's to come in 2021. See you next time.
PlayStation.
There you have it, the first PlayStation State of Play of the year. And here to break down everything we just saw is the first next-gen console watch of the week. I'm Damon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by host of our PlayStation podcast, Jonathan Dornbush.
You really threw me for a loop there, Damon. I did not know how you were going to introduce this episode.
I've got to keep you on your toes. And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Happy to be here.
I'm having a little bit hard hard time hearing you as of right now, Ryan, but we'll see if we can get that fixed. Whether you're watching this live right now or if you're watching this when the show normally goes live on Friday mornings, we are going to react and break down everything we just saw from the State of Play, which seems to be mainly focused on smaller games, not too many bigger, large AAA games in there. There's going to be a PS5 version of Final Fantasy VII. We got a little bit more of a look at Deathloop, which is coming up in just a couple months. The rest is a little bit smaller stuff, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But there wasn't anything about Horizon, Forbidden West, God of War, or even Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which is coming up in a couple months. So, Jonathan, let's begin with you. What's your sort of takeaway from this State of Play, first State of Play in a long time? What was your first reaction?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple, I think, competing thoughts there for me about how little the first-party side of things was there, and we can get to that in a second. I will say I'm very glad the last 6 or so minutes of the State of Play was there, because honestly, for the first 2/3 of it, it wasn't really connecting with me. I was definitely a little let down, I think, about the collection choice there. I think not even maybe pointing to some of those big games, even if they weren't going to be in here, pointing to some of the Ratchet and Clanks of the world may have not been the worst thing to do, to say, like, we'll be showing you some of those more soon. But in the meantime, here's a look at this, especially given we just saw Knockout City at the Nintendo Direct last week, and things of that nature. I think, Solar Ash, looks really great. That's from the Hyper Light Drifter developers. That looked really great. Opening with Crash was a little strange, given that we know it's coming to PS5 already. That was announced a week or two ago as well. But at least for me in the end, Kena, Bridge of Spirits, Deathloop, bringing us basically a James Bond opening of its own, and ending on Final Fantasy VII Remake, coming to PS5 with a seemingly sizable chunk of new content in there that we can dive into. Definitely the latter bit of it really excited me, but man, the first 2/3 of this kind of made me feel the same way I felt about the Nintendo Direct last week, which was, I don't know if we quite needed this event.
Interesting. Ryan, I would love to get your take on the State of Play from an Xbox perspective.
Sure. I hope you can hear me at this point.
Sure can.
Yeah, I actually feel we didn't talk at all, the three of us, during this. We just all watched it here, and I feel exactly the same way as Jonathan. I thought that was mostly pretty underwhelming. I thought the highlight was, unfortunately, a game that's not coming out the longest out of this, which was Kena Bridge of Spirits, which kind of gives me some Ori vibes, but if the camera were like right down behind in Ori, the game looks fantastic. Deathloop, you could see a lot of really neat arcane DNA in that too, with Dishonored and such. So that looked pretty fun. But yeah, it was kind of a snoozer for the most part. I mean, in terms of like big, crazy new announcements. But hey, it's always nice to have new games. And by the way, I will say, kudos to Villain Studios, the Knockout City folks. They were in the Direct last week and the State of Play. So that's like a major notch on their belt. So they should be, that's about the best publicity you can ask for your game, right? So their PR person should probably get a raise.
Hopefully there's an Xbox event they can jump on pretty soon,
exactly.
Just to complete the trilogy.
Microsoft announce an Inside Xbox. Let's do this and get it on there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into some of these games that we saw today. Jonathan, I imagine you must be pretty excited about a proper PlayStation 5 version of Crash Bandicoot 4.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Of course, I reviewed that game when it came out on PS4 last year, and it was one of those, it came out, I believe, in September or October, I want to say. Forgive me, time, passes by strangely these days. But it came out right on the cusp of the next-gen launches, and so it was one of those ones, especially as a longtime Crash fan, I was hoping for a next-gen version, now a new-gen version, and I'm very happy to know it's here. It's coming in March. We had gotten the announcement about this already, so it wasn't a huge surprise, but to see it run, to know that they kind of confirmed the 4K and the 60 frames per second, all that sort of focus is great to me, because this is definitely you need to be pretty precise with your platforming, and so I'm happy to see it coming to next gen. It will be on Xbox Series as well. But I think the biggest thing for me with this one is I loved the game. The load times on PS4 are pretty rough, and so I'm really, really hoping those can kind of be chipped away at with the PS5 version. That's honestly what's kept me from going back to trying to platinum it, is that it takes a little bit too long to get into some of the gameplay.
Now, Ryan, you flagged a potential issue with this. I think Sony said there's an upgrade option available for people who have the PS4 version of the game. What does that mean to you?
I'm glad you brought this up because this was a theme of this entire state of play, which was, wait, so are these upgrades free? Are they paid? What's the deal? And you got to tip the cap to Microsoft because they came out early with smart delivery. We're going to have this thing called smart delivery. It is opt-in. Not every publisher, developer necessarily has to do it. It's not a mandate, but it's there. So if a game has smart delivery, then guess what? You're just going to get a free version, on the upgrade there if you go to from the Xbox One to the Xbox Series. But with PS5, it's just every game you literally have to read the fine print, which is what our handy executive editor of tech, Bo Moore, who's kindly helping out behind the scenes here, went during the stream to the Crash Bandicoot to the PlayStation blog to find, and it says, to upgrade the PlayStation 4 disc version of the game to the digital PS5 version, you'll need a PS5 console with a disc drive. Owners of a PS4 disc copy must insert it into the PS5 every time they want to download or play the PS5 digital version. Users in Japan can upgrade for 100 yen. So there are, and most of the games...
$1?
Don't ask me that. But so most of these games today, it did seem like the fine print was, yes, there is a free upgrade now with Final Fantasy VII. The remake, the new stuff is a paid episode. Even if you are doing you get free upgrade, but then you got to pay for the new thing, which makes perfect sense. But again, it's just unfortunate that Sony didn't kind of do their own version of smart delivery to just kind of lay this out in a very clear and concise system level way.
It creates all this weird wording, as you were saying, Ryan, because when they announced Crash for Next Gen, a week or two ago, and I covered it as a news story, I had the press release, they say, you can upgrade at no cost, except for in Japan for some reason, and, laid it out pretty simply. But because there is that disc and diskless drive version, specificity there, because it's not just sort of the branded thing as Xbox did. In the trailer, it almost made it sound like, watching the state of play, even though I knew it was a free upgrade, when they said that, I was like, wait, is it not? I'm confused now, which shouldn't be the case, especially as someone who knew what the actual information was.
Yeah, Jonathan, can you help me make sense of this? To upgrade the PS4 disc version of the game to the digital PS5 version, you'll need a PS5 console with a disc drive.
So basically, if you have a digital version, you'll just download the digital PS5 version. But if you bought Crash on a disc for PS4, you're still entitled to a free upgrade, but you need to put that disc into a PS5 to be entitled. So basically,
what if you have a digital edition of the PS5?
Then you can't. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's been the case since launch. Unfortunately, it's been this weird back and forth where essentially if you want backward compatible games, but you love physical, I don't know why you bought a digital edition unless it was the only thing available. But yeah, you pretty much, if you bought a physical version of a PS4 game, you need a physical way to use that disc to get the PS5 version.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to what Sony rightly described as one of the biggest games of 2020. It's what they decided to close out their show with today, and that's Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's a PS5 version coming. What's that date? June 10th, that one's coming, and it's called Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate. It's getting upgraded visuals, improved textures, lighting, background environments. They've optimized the load times, added a photo mode, and there's a new episode featuring, I hope it's pronounced Yuffie, because there are two Fs. That's my guess. I don't know. I play. Is it Yuffie? If it's Yuffie, I don't know why there are two Fs.
I've been told it was Yuffie before, but in the trailer she said Yuffie, so it's quite confusing.
Let's stick to
Where's Bo when we need him on the show?
the clearly established laws of the English language. It should be Yuffie. This is nice, Jonathan. I think this is nice to have, but to me it feels a little self-indulgent when we still have absolutely no idea when the next part of Final Fantasy VII Remake is coming.
I'm used to Kingdom Hearts getting Kingdom Hearts final mixes and then 2.8 final chapter prologue editions that remaster older versions. This is par for the course for me for a Square Enix JRPG of this sort of size and caliber for them. So I'm not totally shocked by it. It is a bit funny. I think the name Remake Integrate is wonderfully silly. It's about what I would expect. But again, it's nice that this will be a free upgrade sort of situation with the base game. As Ryan was saying earlier, I get that it will essentially be a paid bit of content for the additional episode that includes Yuffie. My guess is that is to help tide over, because part 2 is probably a little further off than we would hope. I'm not anticipating it being 5 or 6 years away, but 2 to 3 feels a bit more safe than end of this year or early next year. Like I'm not anticipating part 2 in 2022.
Now, Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't the year of exclusivity coming to an end here by the time this game is out? And so, is this coming to Xbox Series as well? Was there fine print on that?
So the year of exclusivity was over essentially with whenever the release date for Final Fantasy VII Remake is up. Whatever, March or April. And so they never said, though, whether it was to other consoles or just to PC, or if we'll have this weird staggered rollout. Theoretically, that means this could come to those other platforms. I'm honestly scanning as we speak Twitter and the PlayStation blog and Square Enix to try to find out the exact info. But as of right now, we only see it tied to PlayStation. Of course, if Remake comes to other platforms, I don't know what they'll do about free upgrades and everything, but I'm keeping an eye as we speak to try to figure this out, because it is definitely
nothing to upgrade from.
Exactly. I more so mean like if it came for Xbox One and Xbox Series, and I guess you could technically upgrade if you haven't gotten a Series yet, but that's more what I meant. But yeah, as of right now, there's no indication it's coming anywhere else, but I will keep an eye as we speak.
Well, I have to admit, I was kind of rolling my eyes through the Final Fantasy VII Remake integrated presentation. But then Yuffie's friend Sonon said, "That's how ninjas do it." And all was forgiven. I was totally on board. That's how ninjas do it. That one's also going to be a free upgrade. Same deal as Crash. If you have the disc version on PS4, you need to have a disc drive PS5 because the disc needs to be in there.
And it looks like, if I interpreted the trailer correctly, there is a performance mode or a 4K mode, but it didn't seem like you're going to get 4K 60 on this. It seemed like that was a choice if I was interpreting, which is fine. I mean, some people, just want to choose one or the other, but it's a shame that a last gen game won't get both.
Let's move on to Deathloop, another one of the bigger games that was part of the show, and a game that's going to be out in just a couple months, 2 or 3 months. This is a game, it's a PS5 console exclusive from Bethesda that's now owned by Microsoft, or soon to be owned by Microsoft. This is a game that Sony has trotted out many, many times, and I feel like people are having a hard time wrapping their head around what this game is, and I feel like Sony's having a hard time building interest in this game. I don't know, Jonathan, am I off the mark there?
I mean, at least among the people I've talked to, I think everyone kind of gets the hook of it being a time loop first-person game, especially once you mention Arcane. People kind of get a sense of a little bit of probably how it'll play based on Dishonored. I mean, the thing about Arcane is, especially with Dishonored, they've all been critically well received. I think the first Dishonored sold pretty well, but Dishonored 2 didn't, I think, meet expectations. Death of the Outsider, I don't think quite was a major hit or anything. So Arcane has always kind of been this like critical darling, and I feel like we may be getting into that same sort of situation where I think Deathloop has all the makings of being an awesome game. Like every time I see it, the art direction, the style, the characters, like everything about it, I want to play this game. I just don't know if it will translate to sort of a mass hit. Especially because I do think once you get into the finer details of like, it's an assassin versus assassin game where you're stuck in a time loop that also has this art style that's very reminiscent of classic Hitchcock posters and also James Bond themes. Like it's all these different disparate things that I think all sound incredible, but I also don't think are easy to elevator pitch people on.
Yeah, Jonathan, Arcane is like the platinum of the West at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like just stylish, gorgeous, just 90 Metacritic games that have just not sold as well as they deserve to.
Yeah, like I have no doubt that I trust them to make a great game, and I think there's nothing that I've seen that makes me worried about what this game will be, but I do worry about sort of its like crossover potential, I guess. Like I think it will probably, especially in May, when kind of everything is coming out for the PlayStation 5 audience. This one will probably get a lot of attention. And I think that looks really cool. But it's also one of those things where this game is predicated on mystery, on not revealing too much about the character, about the player learning about the world as they're immersed in that time loop. And so when you do have a thing predicated on mystery, it's kind of hard to sell too much of that. I think this trailer was honestly the best look at it just because of how fun it was. Like, it doesn't really tell you too much about the game other than it being a first-person shooter. But to me, at least, this trailer, because of the awesome song that was playing, it essentially was a James Bond intro. Like, that sold me, honestly, even more than the past looks have. This made me go, okay, I'm in for this. This is going to be fun.
Ryan, is this something you wish you'd be playing on your Xbox Series X in May?
And I guess maybe in a year from now, because I think that's the deal with this and Ghostwire Tokyo. But yeah, no, I'll play on my PS5. This is definitely, it looks super fun. And you guys made a good point about how they've shown pieces of this, but never. I still think I agree. They haven't shown the whole package well. That having a tough time kind of messaging the whole thing, because we've seen previous looks at this game have kind of made the roguelike element clear about it. Like, okay, you're going to keep trying over and over. This trailer did a great job of showing the combat, the actual, again, kind of that you could see that Arcane, that Dishonored DNA in this game. But this trailer didn't really focus much on the roguelike element of it. So, but nevertheless, I agree with Jonathan. This was the best look at this game because it looked super fun.
Also, just to circle back, as far as I can tell, Square Enix is only referring to FF7 Remake Integrated as coming to PS5.
Sure.
Even on their official tweets and everything, there's still no mention of any other platforms. So keeping an eye there. But yeah.
I think that was out in March of last year. So the year of exclusivity should be coming up pretty soon. But as for Deathloop, the good news is that we're going to have an inside look into the game as part of IGN FanFest on day one this Friday. Our own Michael Soyam is going to be interviewing the game director and art director. They're going to be giving us an inside look at Deathloop, and that is at 9:15 a.m. Pacific this Friday, 12:15 a.m. Eastern. So please be excited to learn more about what's going on with Deathloop.
12:15 p.m. Eastern, yeah, like lunchtime. We have it wrong in the notes there. It's not.
We have it wrong in the notes. Go F yourself, San Diego. Okay. Jonathan, Returnal is a game I know you've had your eye on. Can we reveal what you have planned?
Not quite yet.
Coming up?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. 10 more minutes.
I know.
Forget any mention of that. Anyway, we did get to see another a nice look at Returnal today, and I was impressed with what I saw. It's out April 30th, and it looks completely different from anything else that Housemarque has made, which has made some really cool games, but smaller scale, sort of arcadey stuff, like high score chasing stuff. And I was really impressed with the visuals here. How about you?
Yeah, I think it looks gorgeous. It's I feel like it definitely has the spirit of a Housemarque game because this is something that they talked about back after Nex Machina came out in 2017, where they had a blog post basically saying arcade is dead, and even when these games are critically well received, people just aren't buying them, so they've moved on. And I think you can definitely see some of the arcade DNA in the combat here, absolutely. But as you were saying, it feels like a more AAA, more ambitious production. It's going to have definitely some roguelike elements. So apparently PS5 is the place to be for roguelikes right now. But the creature design looks really gross and interesting in ways that I'm really excited about. And then we get a little bit of the taste of, there is clearly some story to it that's going to be ongoing even as you go through this roguelike loop, as we see Celine, who is the astronaut that you play as, going into this house sort of in a first person perspective that we've seen a bit before, that just appears on the alien world. It's very mysterious and creepy. It looks a lot like the PT house, which is definitely a way to get PlayStation fans interested for sure. I'm totally down for it. Like, I trust Housemarque on a gameplay level. This seems to be the most they've done on a story level, and it's definitely a more ambitious scale than before. It's another one like Deathloop. I can imagine it's maybe a little bit hard to sell, especially as a new franchise, totally not necessarily based on anything else. But my hope is this one comes out as well as past Housemarque games for sure.
Yeah, it seems like if roguelike is the correct way to describe this, it seems like they're out building in a lot of story elements too that you'll slowly reveal with each new run, much like Hades did, which I think helps soften the blow for a lot of people who don't like hardcore roguelikes where you just, you start out from scratch, go back to square one every single run.
Yeah.
Ryan, have you gotten to experience any of Housemarque's previous work, like Resogun, Super Stardust, or Dead Nation?
A little bit of Resogun back at the PS4 launch when everybody at IGN was just playing all the launch titles on both the Xbox One and the PS4, and yeah, that was an excellent game. This one you can clearly see the production value on the screen. I mean, they're taking it to the highest level of this studio, this already talented studio has ever taken it, and I think we were talking about like Critical Darling, like these guys, Housemarque definitely fits that mold. Housemarque, they've never made a bad game to the best of my knowledge. So odds are that this will be very good to great, if not even more better than that. And hopefully people will be willing to give it a look. I mean, depending on, did they give a release date for this one? Yes, April 30th. Yeah. So that's actually, that probably bodes very well for them because we are in the usual post-console launch drought right now where there is almost nothing, especially, I mean, what did we had Hitman in January on the Xbox, there was the Medium, but really, it's pretty quiet until, there's a big month coming up in May and then a couple big things for PS5 in June. So April 30th should hopefully get some eyes just from some gamers hungry for a next-gen game on this.
Yeah, April 30th, we could go ahead and say that kicks off the big month of May, I think. And then there was Sifu, a new game that was revealed from Devolver, I believe. And I believe that this is the developers of Absolver. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Absolver and Devolver. That one's out later this year, and that one looks very cool to me. It looks like a Damie game for sure. A lot of people's immediate reaction was, it's Hallway Fight, the game. And that's how it starts, but I think there's more to it than that. To me, it seems like it's a brawler that they're sort of trying to recreate the feeling of the modern day brutal martial arts film like The Raid and The Raid 2, which are super up my alley. Jonathan, how did this one strike you?
Yeah, this one looks really cool. It's, especially coming from the Absolver team and their knack for combat. I'm very excited by what that could bring to this. But yeah, I think the initial reaction is very much like, oh, someone really, really loved the Daredevil hallway fight scenes. And as you were saying, The Raid and whatnot, and put that into a game. But that's also not a bad elevator pitch. But sure. This one looks really great. Obviously, hand-to-hand combat is certainly something that we've seen a lot of in video games before, so I'm excited to see what they can bring new to it. And we actually have a pretty in-depth interview piece up on IGN that you can read right now that Matt Kim on our news team did with the development team to get a little bit more info on it. Cool. So a little bit about the inspirations for it, what they're hoping to do with the gameplay, etc.
We're also seeing the different ages of the character here too. So I don't know. This could be another die, rinse, and repeat roguelike game. I don't know. That seems to be the theme of recent PlayStation 5 games. Ryan, I'm sorry to say that one has been announced for PS4, PS5, and PC.
Well, it was a state of play after all. It wasn't an Xbox showcase.
But Ryan, I think there is another game that you do have some experience with, Oddworld Soulstorm.
Yeah,
and that one's coming soon on April 6th, and that's what I'm really excited for.
And you should be, I think. This game's been around the block a few times on the preview circuit. I played this game 2 years ago. Yeah, whatever. Before the last real E3. So I guess that was 2019. And it's very fun. I mean, it's a proper Oddworld classic sequel, I should say. Mm-hmm. And the cinematics are stunning in this game. The regular moment-to-moment graphics are pretty darn nice too, and there's a lot of just really neat platforming elements here. I was really glad to see a release date, and not just any release date, but a pretty recent one that's coming up very soon, April 6th here, because my initial reaction when this came on the State of Play was, I've seen this like 17 times already, and not just me, but this has been featured in various conferences. In fact, I think it was at the last PlayStation conference, if I remember correctly. Wow. It was, so it's been out there a number of times. Glad it's coming soon.
Yeah, I've been on board with this series since Abe's Odyssey, way back on the PlayStation 1. It's interesting that at that time, this was supposed to be the next evolution in like cinematic platformers. And I think it's cool. They're still carrying that torch today in 2021. Their term was 2.9D platforming.
And
But
what
games-
was even? Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying games like Inside and Limbo can trace their roots back to the original Abe's Odyssey.
Yeah, and speaking of, we were talking earlier in this show about the foggy nature of the upgrades from PS4 to PS5. Well, here's a game that it was really cool to see. Oddworld is just, if you have an active PlayStation Plus membership, this game will be free on launch day. So that's really cool.
And then at the top of the show, we mentioned both Kena and Solar Ash. I know, Jonathan, you said you were excited about those. Kena's got a little bit further out release date, August 24th. Ryan, you said this one gave you some Ori vibes. What's the sort of elevator pitch for this one, Jonathan?
So this one it's the first game from a studio called Ember Lab, who people may know from a very, very awesome sort of fan-made Majora's Mask animated video that went viral a few years back. This is their first crack at an actual game, and essentially you'll be taking the role of Kena in what looks to be sort of a like the trappings of a third-person action game, but it's got this really, really beautiful, I think, sort of marriage of Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli, and Pixar sort of animation to it in 3D, of course, but it's got a really, really beautiful world. It's completely original. There's clearly something going on with these cute little characters called the Rot, who will kind of follow Kena around the world, and it seems like you can amass more of them as it goes on. We haven't gotten too many details about the gameplay, but it looks beautiful every time we see it, and we saw some really amazing creatures this time.
Cool. Well, Ryan and Jonathan, thank you for joining me for a little recap of the state of play today. I want to deliver some poll results from our last episode, but our document has grown to such epic proportions. Here, I think I found them. The question we asked you last time was, have you experienced any DualSense drift issues? And 44% of you said, I'll get back to you when I get a PS5. So sorry, I know there's a lot of you out there still don't have one, but 43% no problems at all. Which is good to hear. Only 10% said they had received or experienced any difficulties. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to both Ryan and Jonathan. Hope everybody enjoyed the State of Play. We'll be back next week, 6 a.m. Pacific on Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern for more Next Gen Console Watch, and we'll see you then.